Let me give you a proper introduction. It's a very special day here at the Voice newspaper. We're joined by a very important guest. He's an award-winning writer, education campaigner, lecturer, researcher, and activist, Professor Gus John. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Are you okay? You adjusting your lighting?
If it's fine by you, it's fine by me.
Yeah, you look perfect.
Good, excellent, excellent.
Okay, now we've got so much I want to discuss with you. But firstly, you know, you've written this very important piece for the Voice newspaper about recent deportations to Jamaica and Zimbabwe. Talk to us about what prompted you to write this piece for the Voice.
We've had immigration policies which have favored the old Commonwealth. So you have New Zealanders and Australians coming here, getting lost in the population. And even when they're not lost and they're being totally illegitimate, they are being given more privileges and opportunities than people from the Caribbean, let's say. And there is the justification for all of that, and the motivation for it indeed is sheer systemic and structural racism. Now, as I said in the article, you can't arbitrarily determine that you would treat one group of people meeting the same kind of criteria, and the targeting of them is linked to the messages that the government sends out about the fact that we are not wanted here. It is not just reprehensible, it is oppressive, racist, and a form of apartheid for this Home Secretary or any other to be operating these laws. If you're a 16-year-old and you have a conviction for whatever the police decide, they try to search you, you tell them to get their hands off or whatever, they charge you with assault, you go to the magistrate's court, the magistrate agrees with them, and you have a conviction. They then come 20, 30, 40 years later and find that, like your grandmother, you're undocumented, and they use that as a reason to invoke that old spent conviction and send you on some plane back to Jamaica or Zimbabwe or Nigeria, wherever it is. It's a fundamental abuse of people's human rights. Now, the fact that that law got onto the statute books in the first place was reprehensible enough. The fact that it is being used in the context of the hostile environment and damaging people who've been here for donkey's years is, I mean, look, everybody knows that there is crime in this wretched society, right? Everybody knows that there are white criminals and black criminals of the same age, of different ages. Yeah. So if you're living in the society and you commit a crime, or you are convicted for a crime that you did not commit, and that conviction stays on your record, why should it be that a Home Secretary is able to come and say, well, you've got a conviction, you've abused our hospitality by committing a crime while you're here, irrespective of the circumstances, and therefore we're going to boot you out. My point is this, that as I keep saying, even to my own children, people can only keep doing things to you as long as you let them. That goes for us as individuals, and it goes for us as a so-called community, right? The kind of things that this wretched state has been doing to us for God knows how many years. And we go on with business as usual, as if it's got nothing to do with us as a collective. Yeah. So that, you know, when these 13 young people were killed in that fire in New Cross in 1981, we brought between 20 and 25,000 people out on the streets of Britain to protest and say, this is not acceptable. You, as the British state, the British nation, have to understand that this isn't something that happened in Croatia or whatever. It happened a few miles away from the parliament in London. So it is not just a tragedy for the relatives of those who died or for the Black community of Lewisham or Britain. It's a tragedy for the whole country. Yeah. And therefore we are wanting to demonstrate to you that whatever the media might want to say, whatever the press and the others of them might want to say, we are demonstrating that we belong here. These were young children who were British, born in Britain. And you can't just disown them because they were Black children born in Britain. So we were sending out some powerful political messages. My burning desire is to see us collectively as a community recover that strength and determination, not to let the British state walk all over us.
Such an important point. In your piece, you said, we who are British and Black have had enough of state racism and of being treated like our lives don't matter. Now, you've mentioned there, for example, the Windrush scandal, how our elders have been treated. You've mentioned policing. And of course, we know when it comes to education, Black children are more likely to be permanently excluded than their white counterparts.
Absolutely.
We know when it comes to the pass rate as well, Black children are falling behind in school. With all these issues that we're facing as a community in Britain, like, how does it make you feel to see loads of Black people lining up, like you said, to get an OBE? Because we know you turned one down in, was it 1999, because you felt it was an insult to the struggle of African people. Is that how you still feel about things like OBEs?
Indeed. I mean, in 1999, I was invited by Tony Blair to receive a CBE, Commander of the Order of the British Empire. And I wrote to him and said, look, you know, please do not insult me. I spent all my life fighting against the legacy of empire in this place, the biggest manifestation of which is racism. And you can't turn around and want to give me a gong for whatever it is, promoting racial harmony or whatever else it may be, because it's utterly meaningless. The words I used was that it is part of the iconography of empire, which is what it is. While not being immodest enough to want to argue that in terms of what I've done with my life, I haven't made a contribution to the society. There have to be other ways of marking such a contribution on my or anybody else's part than wanting to strap us to this wretched business about empire. Because, you know, if the state wanted to do something about empire, it would have organized its education and schooling system in a manner that taught white British people about what empire meant and what it meant to people of my parents' generation who came here long before I did. And the debt that Britain continues to owe to all of us.
I mean, I want to touch on education there because you brought it up. I know since post George Floyd, there's been a lot of promises made about, you know, changes to the educational system, more Black history on the national curriculum, you know, promises that the curriculum will be decolonized. Is this something that you support, or would you like to see, you know, Black communities sort of taking the bull by the horns and saying, no, we're going back to how our parents and our grandparents did it. We're gonna school our children on our history. You know, would you like to see the reemergence of the Black supplementary school movement as well? I mean, what do you make of this whole idea of decolonizing the curriculum? And should Black families be educating their children about their history and heritage?
Well, I mean, the answer to the last part of your question is absolutely yes. You've helpfully placed this in some more historical perspective by talking about the Black supplementary movement and so on. I want to link my answer to what I've just said about the way the British have dealt with their colonial and imperialist past, all right? Firstly, on the question of decolonization, I am on record as saying that you cannot, whether you're a school, a day nursery, or a university, you cannot decolonize the curriculum without decolonizing the institution, right? If you don't decolonize the institution and understand how the institution as a whole provide direction and cover for the way in which Black people's history, creative products, intellectual products, etc., are marginalized, then all you're doing is adding some new names to book lists in order to suggest that the book list is not totally white and Eurocentric. That even without one Black person in Britain, it was necessary for the British state to decolonize its schooling and education system. I did a keynote address at the University of East Anglia some years ago, where I was talking about the role of schooling and education in promoting social justice. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I said to them is, universities and institutions of higher education have always performed a major function in the society. It trains and equips people to be leaders and managers of state, of industry, of culture and whatever. And it is those people coming out of universities with those awards, those degrees, etc., that get to run the system. Now, if you do not prepare them while in university to be able to run the system fairly, to treat Black people with equity, and to understand that you can't organize a society into groups where some are at the bottom of the pile and you feel you have a right to use them to create wealth for you.
Now listen, this conversation won't be complete without me asking you about your Grenadian heritage. When I got the opportunity to speak to you, I said, listen, can I sneak in a question about Grenada? I have to. My dad's from Grenada, he's from Carriacou.
All right, okay,
yeah,
good.
So I wanted to ask you, you came here in 1964, you said, but talk to me a little bit about your life in Grenada and how your Grenadian roots have shaped you into the man that you are, because Grenada has a rich history and also a rich revolutionary history as well, which is being manifested in you with your fiery spirit. I see a lot of that in you. Talk to me a bit about Grenada.
Well, yes, I mean, I don't think I would have been as privileged to have been born anywhere else, I promise you. I was born in a very small village called Concord in the parish of St. John's, to a couple of wonderful people. My father, Wilfred John, was completely illiterate, functionally illiterate. He was many things. He was a peasant farmer. He was a stone mason. He was a woodcutter. He and others felled trees and made boards to build houses. And everything from houses to coffins to boats to whatever. And he was also the village herbalist. He was the bush doctor.
Right.
Most impressive man. I mean, nobody has influenced my life as much as that man has. And we loved each other to bits, I mean, without a doubt. My mom was a peasant farmer herself, and she sold the produce from the lands in the market in St. George's. And so as a young boy, I spent a lot of time on the land with my mother. I got to know early on what plantation life looked like, because there were lots of people whom my mother knew who were living in these little shacks on former estates where the families of planters who once owned enslaved Africans were still living and owning the estate houses and so on. And I got to know a lot about, you know, how people worked hard, how little they got paid, how their lives were regulated, how they didn't own the land that they were working, and so on. As I was growing up, the one thing that really used to get me absolutely wild is when people took liberties with my father because he couldn't read and write. If you wanted to see me behave like an animal, you just mess with my father because he couldn't read and write. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, it was serious. Mm-hmm. So it's that sense of social injustice and detestable attitudes towards the poor that stayed with me from my youth, basically, and it helped me to deal with racism in Britain, because I would have none of it, you know what I mean? My human dignity, as far as I'm concerned, is not to be messed with.